Whitney Houston died in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton. Michael Jackson died in a Holmby Hills mansion. Prince was found dead in the elevator of his own estate. They had everything money could buy: space, privacy, security, the best help on Earth. They still died of addiction. For 70 years, science said the drugs had hooked them. In 1978, a psychologist in Vancouver built a cage 200 times bigger than normal and proved it was something else entirely. For most of the 20th century, addiction had one explanation: the drug. The chemicals get into your brain, they hijack your reward system, and you can't say no. It looked open and shut, and the evidence was a stack of laboratory rats. In the 1950s, two researchers at McGill University named Olds and Milner wired electrodes into the pleasure centers of rats. The rats would press a lever for stimulation until they collapsed. They wouldn't eat. They wouldn't sleep. Some pressed the lever 5,000 times an hour until they died. Then came the drug studies. In the 1960s, scientists put single rats in small wire cages with 2 water bottles. One was plain. The other was laced with morphine. The rats chose the morphine. Then they drank more of it. Then they stopped eating. Then they drank themselves to death. Hundreds of studies. Same result every time. Drug equals hook. Brain equals victim. Willpower doesn't matter. This was the science the world built its drug laws on. Nancy Reagan's Just Say No. The war on drugs. A single milligram of heroin so powerful it could pull a soul out of a body. But Bruce Alexander, a psychology professor at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, kept noticing something nobody else cared about. In World War II, military doctors gave morphine to millions of wounded soldiers. After the war, almost none of them became addicts. In Vietnam, a 1971 study found that 20% of American soldiers used heroin regularly while deployed. When they came home, less than 5% stayed addicted. If the drug was the hook, this didn't add up. Morphine doesn't care whether you're in a jungle or in a hospital bed. Alexander had a hunch. Maybe the rats in those original studies weren't addicted because of the morphine. Maybe they were addicted because they were rats living alone in a small wire cage with absolutely nothing to do. So in 1978, with 2 graduate students named Patricia Hadaway and Robert Coambs, he built something new. They called it Rat Park. Rat Park was an enclosure 200 times larger than a standard laboratory cage. Picture 2 square meters of plywood floor, painted with woodland scenes on the walls, cedar shavings everywhere, tin cans to crawl into, balls to push around, running wheels, climbing platforms, tunnels. 16 to 20 rats inside at all times, males and females. They could socialize, mate, play, raise litters. They had unlimited food. It was, for a rat, paradise. In the corner of Rat Park were 2 water bottles. One was plain water, the other was laced with morphine and sweetened with sugar to override the natural bitter taste. The same exact setup that had killed thousands of caged rats before. Then Alexander waited. The caged rats, kept alone in small wire boxes for comparison, drank the morphine water heavily, just like every study before. The Rat Park rats sampled it, sometimes took a few sips, and then went back to plain water. The caged rats drank up to 20 times more morphine than the Rat Park rats. Even when Alexander forced the Rat Park rats to become physically dependent first, 57 days of nothing but morphine water, they voluntarily switched back to plain water as soon as both options were offered. They detoxed themselves. The caged rats kept drinking until they died. The finding was extraordinary. The same drug, the same dose, the same species. The only thing that changed was the cage. Alexander published the results in 1978, 1979, and 1981 in a journal called Pharmacology, Biochemistry, and Behavior. He submitted the same data to Science and to Nature, the 2 most prestigious journals in the world. Both rejected it. The field ignored Rat Park for years. Pharmaceutical companies were already developing new opioids built on the chemical hook model. Drug laws were already being written around it. The DARE program was preparing to tell American schoolchildren that one hit would ruin their lives. Telling everyone the cage might matter more than the drug was not what anyone in power wanted to hear. Replications were mixed. Some labs found the same effect. Others couldn't reproduce it. The debate continues today. But the core finding that enriched social environments dramatically reduce voluntary drug intake has been replicated enough times now that it isn't really up for debate anymore. For decades, the work sat there, mostly unread. Then in 2015, a British journalist named Johann Hari wrote a book called Chasing the Scream and gave a TED Talk about Rat Park that has now been watched over 20 million times. He summed it up in one line. The opposite of addiction, he said, isn't sobriety. It's connection. And suddenly, the patterns made sense. Vietnam vets came home to families and stopped using because they had families to come home to. Portugal decriminalized all personal drug use in 2001 and poured the savings into community housing and job programs. Their overdose deaths dropped by over 80%. The American opioid epidemic hit hardest in the towns where the factory closed, the church emptied out, and there was nowhere left to belong. And the question we started with answers itself. Whitney Houston had a mansion. Michael Jackson had Neverland. Prince had Paisley Park. They had buildings the size of city blocks. They had assistants and lawyers and security guards. They had everything Rat Park gave its rats, except the part that mattered. The other rats. The unforced kind. The kind who would still come over if you were broke and bored on a Tuesday afternoon. A mansion isn't Rat Park if you're alone in it. Money buys you a bigger cage. It does not buy you a park. The cage isn't the size of your room. The cage is the size of your relationships. And most of us are still drinking the morphine water. We just have better bathrooms now.